$5 for you, Dad. That was the whole gift. 5 crumpled bills rattling in a pink pig. On the same night, a red bow crowned a luxury car for someone who wasn't family. The sting wasn't the money. It was the message. I was useful, not loved. Then the forgotten purse, the buzzing phone, my name tucked into a stranger's calendar. Proof that humiliation was only the opening act. I swallowed the hurt, recorded every promise, traced every dollar, and let the truth walk itself into daylight. This isn't a story about outrage, it's about discipline. How law outworks lies, how boundaries rebuild, what betrayal tried to break, and how an ordinary man turned a con into a case. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. Christmas Eve laid a thin quilt of powder over the cul-de-sac. From the kitchen window, I watched my son cinch a glossy red bow to the hood of a new Lexus RX, the kind of present you park instead of wrap. Logan's coat hung open, tie loose, face bright with the thrill of spectacle. Monica stood at the curb in a camel coat, scarf tucked just so, while Kara circled the car with her phone held high, framing proof that the night had gone their way. Behind me, the house breathed heat and cinnamon. Steam drifted from the sink and the floor creaked where Judy and I had stepped 1,000 times. I kept to the shadow of the curtain and tried to decide whether I was proud of my boy for doing well enough to hand out luxury or worried about what it costs a man when he confuses price with value. Pride and worry are a married pair, they rarely travel alone. Logan swung the passenger door and pointed at the touch screen as though he were a salesman. Kara mouthed a silent wow, then threw a thumbs up toward the window. No one looked in, though they knew I had kept dinner warm and the water moving. I do not require applause. Still, there are silences that feel like verdicts. The front door opened on a draft of cold air and glossy cheer. Logan stepped in first, cheeks flushed, palms rubbing as if he had dragged the North Star home by hand. He set a small pink piggy bank on the counter, the plastic kind with a slit wide enough for a folded bill. Coins would rattle, bills whisper. I lifted it and the whisper was thin. $5 slid against the molded belly, a papery sigh that sounded more like apology than gift. "For you, Pop," he said. "Best saver I know. Merry Christmas, Pop." Monica followed a heartbeat later, perfumed warmth curling into the room. "You always spoil me," she said, light as a bell. From the doorway, Logan called, "She deserves something nice this year," meaning the car, meaning Monica. Kara laughed from the hall. "The leather's unreal," she said, voice all sparkle and camera light. "Wait till you hear the sound system." I set the piggy bank beside our wedding photo, Judy in lace and me in a rented suit. 2 faces tilted toward a future we once knew by heart. The plastic pig looked like a joke someone forgot to finish. I rinsed the carving knives, stacked plates, wiped a condensation ring from the table. Out front, another flash popped. A red bow is a small sun. It makes its own weather. Through the glass, I watched Monica lift her chin and accept the lens, that pleased half-smile people wear when they are being photographed with something that proves they belong. It is a particular smile, practiced without a mirror. They came back in to say their goodbyes, quick and bright and already halfway to the driveway. Logan hugged me with one arm and smelled like cold air and showroom wax. Monica touched my sleeve. "Thank you for dinner, Sam." Kara promised to text the photos. "You have to see how the color reads at night," she said. "The paint almost glows." "Lovely," I said. After the door shut, the house settled into its old bones. The hallway clock ticked like a distant engine. I dried my hands, and that was when I noticed it. Monica's purse, black leather with crisp stitching, resting near the fruit bowl as if it had always belonged to my counter. The strap lay open, the zipper half drawn. It had the careful carelessness of a thing left to be found. Her perfume lingered, bright on top and bittersweet underneath. Judy would have teased me for knowing the notes, but years with a wife train a man to keep track of small weather. The purse was not heavy, not light, simply deliberate. I moved it farther from the edge, wiped a dry ring beneath it, and told myself that the decent thing is to keep what is forgotten safe until it is claimed. Decency can sound like naivety until you pair it with patience. Outside, the wind lifted the bough and let it fall, a red pulse against the dark street. Tire tracks scalloped the snow and stopped at the curb like a signature. I set my palms on the counter and let the laminate cool the heat in them. The piggy bank looked up with its permanent grin. $5. I could hear Judy's unhurried voice reminding me that dignity is a bill you pay on time, especially when no one offers to split it. I laid a dish towel over the pig to keep it from catching my eye. There are gifts meant to honor and gifts meant to train. You learn the difference by the shape of the quiet they leave behind. I walked the rooms, once turning off strings of light, testing a window latch, counting forks back into the drawer because counting returns order to a day that has slipped its line. When I came back, I set the purse and the pig side by side beneath the warm cone of the ceiling lamp. One was leather and gleam with a name pressed in small, proud letters. The other was dime store plastic molded into a smile. Between them stretched the distance we had covered as a family in one evening. That is a lot of road for a short drive. Snow ticked against the screen. The furnace clicked, then sighed. Out by the curb, the Lexus coughed once as Logan tried its remote start, a purr that sounded like a promise made on credit. The bow nodded and settled back against the hood. I wiped the counter one last time, then left them there in the little halo of their own importance. A purse no one should forget and a pig no one should give, keeping each other company while the house remembered how to be quiet again. The house had that thin, late-night hush that follows company out the door. Heat clicked inside the vents, and the window glass still held the ghost of Logan's breath where he'd leaned in earlier to show Monica the paint. On the counter, her purse waited where it shouldn't be, the zipper left in that careful middle ground between shut and invitation. Her perfume hung in the air, bright up top, bitter underneath like a smile with a clause. I set the purse squarely on a dry spot and stood a beat to decide whether I was about to be nosy or prudent. The difference lives in intent. I wasn't hunting secrets. I was guarding what had landed in my kitchen. The phone inside trembled against the leather. I didn't unlock it. I only read what the lock screen insisted on telling a passerby. Deposit posted. $12,500 Sunfield Capital. A second banner scrolled up. Thursday, bring read file. My name is Reed in the way a mailbox says it. Plain block letters hammered to wood. Seeing it glow from Monica's phone did something colder than the weather. I let the phone dim and stayed with my pulse until it learned to behave. I eased the purse open just enough to keep a careless spill from becoming a problem later. A slim wallet, neat as a file drawer. Store cards for places with marble floors and champagne at the register. Crumpled receipts with totals that buy a week of groceries if you're not trying to impress anyone. A printed statement folded in quarters, the toner still a little smudged at the edges as if it had been grabbed from a communal copier and rushed into a bag. The balances did not belong to a woman who told stories about stretching casseroles and clipping coupons. The math was wrong. The story was wrong. The tone was wrong. I closed the wallet and the purse and put both hands on the counter to feel the laminates cool. Next to the purse, the pink pig looked up with its permanent grin. $5 settled in its belly like a dare. You don't need a sermon to know when a gift is a cue. The bow on the hood had been a small parade. The pig was something else. It was instruction. The landline rang and startled the quiet. A man's voice identified himself from the state police, courteous and official. We received a missing person report for Monica Lai. Last seen at your address. Is she with you? I told him she had left with my son Logan not 20 minutes earlier. He could reach him at the same number he'd always had. Thank you, he said, and the click after his goodbye was soft but final. I set the handset down and let the absurdity finish walking through me. Missing is a big word to use lightly. I looked again at the purse and the pig side by side, one item too much and one insult too neat. Hurt was the first shape the night tried to make of me. Hurt is hot and loud and blind. I let it pass. Then came something quieter, steadier. Resolve wears no perfume. It just sits down and gets to work. The laptop warmed my palms. I typed, Daniel I. Portland, elder estate attorney, and the machine obliged with headshots and bios. There he was on conference stage in a clean navy suit. Slides behind him about financial exploitation, guardianships, power of attorney abuse. Quotes in regional papers about protecting seniors from friendly thieves and complicated paperwork. A photo of him leaning toward an older woman at a clinic table, listening like it was his job and his calling both. It wasn't rumor or rumor's cousin. It was a public life documented by other people's cameras. I scrolled through articles and thought about Monica's softly lit claims of being alone in the world. I thought about the way she had fit her hand through the crook of Logan's arm, the way Kara had mirrored her from the other side. People reinvent themselves all the time. Grief is a power tool for that. But facts have a way of asking to be reconciled, and these facts weren't shaking hands. I pulled a notepad from the drawer where Judy used to keep stamps and wrote the words that needed shepherding. Sunfield Capital. Deposit $12,500. Thursday, bring read file. Missing person call. Daniel, elder fraud. I underlined my own name once and then again, not to scare myself, but to pin the feeling down where I could see it. Names are only ink until someone writes them on a form you didn't sign. The purse stayed where it was. I would not be the man who rifled a guest's things and made the mess worse. I would be the man who noticed, documented, and moved at a speed that kept his dignity intact. In the morning, I would begin with the one kind of light that doesn't blink. The records at the county office and the lawyer who knows how to read them. There are right doors to knock on when the story turns and forgets your name. I rinsed the mug I'd been neglecting and turned off the string of lights across the pantry door. The furnace hummed and the house settled, and somewhere down the street, a garage door groaned shut. On my counter, the purse and the pig sat under the warm cone of the ceiling lamp like odd partners in a joke I hadn't heard the punchline to yet. Out at the curb, the Lexus was gone, but the bow's red shadow still colored the snow where the hood had been. What exactly were they planning to do with the name Reed? I folded the notepad closed and put it next to the phone so the question would be waiting where I could see it at daybreak. The morning after, the town wore yesterday's glitter like a headache. I drove to Ruth Kaplan's office while plows threw up slow curtains of snow and the courthouse block blinked sleepy holiday lights. The corridor smelled of coffee and lemon polish. Ruth had left the lamp on in her conference room, the shade-turned winter sun into something small enough to sit with. She greeted me with the mix I have always liked about her, warmth braided to procedure, and motioned me to a chair while she woke her terminal. I set my notebook on the table and kept my hands flat the way a man does when he is determined to use them only for turning pages. Ruth, check if any POA in my name was filed this month, I said, surprised at how level the words came out. Her fingers made a habit of the keys. The county site coughed up a filing stamped 3 weeks ago. A durable power of attorney naming Logan as agent over my finances and real property. Ruth clicked the scan. A notary seal blossomed in gray. 2 witness lines lay side by side like tire tracks. My name curved across the signature block in a hand that knew me too well and not well enough. Ruth slid her glasses down and studied it. I studied it too. 90% can fool a clerk. The last 10 tells on you. My R does not tilt that far forward. I dot my I with the stingy kind of dot Judy used to tease me about, not the soft nicked circle on the page. My S tightens at the end like a wrench closing on a nut. I did not sign that, I said. Ruth didn't argue. She opened a new tab and began building a ladder from what we knew to what we could prove. Another search returned an appraisal request in October. Requester, Logan Reed, purpose, estate planning. A site visit by a contractor I had never met. No authorization from me in the file, no initials, no scheduling call, no nothing. The printout made a hollow sound when it touched the table. I felt the floor find me in a useful way, like the moment you stop sliding on black ice and remember how boots work. Ruth summarized calmly, as if she were reading an x-ray to a man who still didn't feel the crack. They could encumber the house, sign as sell-leaseback, move funds, even change beneficiaries, she said. If a bouillero, bank wants to believe. A stamp and signature carry the leal ongue. We weren't talking about disrespect anymore. We were talking about leverage. Anger wanted the room. I gave the chair to discipline. Not yet, I said. We build the chain of evidence, then we cut it at the root. Ruth nodded, then pinned me with the look professionals keep for clients about to be brave in ways that become expensive. Call me before anyone hands you a pen, she said. I promised like I meant it. She printed what the system would give. The POA scan, the filing log with timestamps, the appraisal request, the valuation summary, and the contractor's license and address. We sketched a short plan that felt like a rail line. Document every contact, keep the purses found, record any conversation in which someone tried to steer my assets. Prepare to revoke the POA the moment the larger pattern was captured. Consider a beneficiary deed, a TOD, to lock the house so forged keys rattled in a dead latch. She set a revocation packet on standby and placed an internal alert on my file so her staff would call if anyone tried to record a transfer. On the corner of my copy, she wrote in tight blue ink, "Chain of custody matters." I signed the visitor sheet and folded the papers into a craft envelope. In the lobby, a plastic tree blinked bravely. Somewhere a radio worked through a carol with a key change that missed its footing. Outside, the day was the kind of bright that hurts, slush feathered at the curb. I drove to the hardware store in a salt fog and bought a UV marker and a button recorder that looked like it belonged to a coat I didn't own. The clerk made small talk about half-price melt and the Broncos' chances. I nodded like a man buying batteries. You never know when you'll need light. Back home, I put the envelope in the metal file drawer where our mortgage once lived, slid the UV marker into my shirt pocket, and clipped the recorder under my collar to learn its weight. It felt like resolve pretending to be plastic. I logged times, places, and names into my notebook in a square hand Judy would have approved of, then closed the cover and let the vents carry a long breath into the rooms. I walked the perimeter of the house the way I used to walk a car on the lift. Slow, methodical, listening for knocks and looking for leaks. The windows held a skim of cold light. The furnace hummed in even bars. The kitchen clock kept honest time. I pictured my name bending where my hand would never bend. I pictured Logan's name in the requester line like a rash under a shirt. I pictured how quickly a forged kindness turns into a very real debt. Anger tried again, but it didn't get far. Years teach a man that speed and courage are cousins who shouldn't share a wallet. My phone buzzed on the table. Ruth's text arrived with the kind of timing that makes you believe in metronomes. The notary who stamped the POA is Kara's sister. Same last name. And the mailing address on her commission is a P.O. Box County record show Kara used 2 years ago. I stared until the word stopped being a slap and became a map. The circle was smaller than I had drawn it. The work would have to be cleaner than rage ever is. I set the phone beside the envelope and the UV pin, and the house held its breath with me until the vents exhaled. The cafe by the tracks wore its regulars like a sweater. Men with newspapers folded into narrow flags, a grad student editing in headphones, the barista tamping patience into the portafilter. I arrived early. Monica arrived earlier. She had picked the corner seat with her back to the wall and the room laid out in front of her the way a map lays out trouble. Her coat was the color of cream and coffee. Her smile, practiced to a soft edge, was already waiting. We let the pleasantries skim the surface. I set my cup down in the saucer exactly once and left it there, a small treaty about noise. Monica slid a folder toward the space between us and began with a voice built for leaning you across a line you didn't know you were near. The idea, she said, was elegant. Sell the house to a private group that specializes in senior assets, lease it back at a favorable rate, unlock a pile of equity that was otherwise sleeping through its best years. Pair it with certain instruments, she liked the word vehicles, to optimize tax exposure for folks my age. The window, she noted, was narrow. The partners preferred to bring on only a few clients per quarter. Holiday timing was ideal if one had the foresight to move. I watched the train rush past the big window and loosen a shutter from the glass. When I looked back, she was talking about how liquidity is dignity when stairs get steeper and winter lasts longer. I said I understood the premise and the sales pitch both. I asked about terms. She answered with the kind of numbers that sound like relief until you stack them against the rent they require. She sounded almost apologetic when she mentioned discretion. The partners valued privacy. They didn't advertise. They didn't sit for meetings with just anyone. I'll need to meet your partners in person, I said, and let the sentence live on the table without company, before anything is signed. She held the stillness like a waitress deciding whether to comp your pie. Then she nodded with a smile I'd seen in a rear-view mirror once when a young officer decided to give me a warning instead of a ticket. They are very private, she said, but I'll see what I can do. She leafed to a page with tidy columns. For the program to engage, she said, we usually start a relationship with a commitment in the 600 to 800 range. It signals good faith, covers the initial structuring, gets the machine working for you. Her fingernail tapped a box with a deadline that looked like a calendar but felt like a train schedule. I asked nothing else. A man does not negotiate the price of bait when he intends to measure the hook. We ended with an agreement to stay warm over the next few days. Outside, the winter sun had the bleached look of a bone. I walked the platform until the cold climbed my shins, then headed home through streets that exhaled wood smoke and old snow. On the counter, my notebook waited with the patience of tools. I set out a fan of 20s the way a mechanic lays out sockets, largest to smallest, and thumbed the cap off the UV marker. A quick, thin line along the portrait, tucked where only a black light would coax it to brag. Years in a garage leave you with habits. When something keeps going missing, you make it glow. I worked 10 bills and let the ink dry while I checked the button recorder. It blinked once, a tiny red promise, then settled into silence beneath my collar. Resolve is a quiet weight. You only notice it when you take it off. Logan texted from the driveway and came in carrying a plastic folder with printouts too glossy for comfort. He was trying for casual, boots unzipped, voice pitched low like we were two men discussing weather, but the skin around his eyes was tight. He spread charts across the table, debt consolidation, payment ladders, yield opportunities with names that sounded like gated communities. He talked about a package that could make their numbers behave, about one lane that would close if they missed it, about another that cost more to enter if they waited. Kara's job went away back in the fall, he said, and the word away did more work than it should. We've been juggling. The Lexus was, well, it was a gesture, a show of good faith so Monica's people would take us seriously. He said it quickly, like jumping a puddle and hoping it is shallow. I tapped the corner of a page and kept my voice level. What are Monica's people called? He looked at the ceiling as if the name might be written there. They prefer to keep a low profile. Have you met anyone besides Monica? A shrug that wanted to be a yes. She handles the introductions. It's kind of her lane. Do you have anything legal with their letterhead, or is it all through her? His mouth made the shape of a laugh and then forgot the sound. She said they'll bring the formal stuff when you're ready. The recorder was a cold button against my sternum. I could feel its outline when I breathed. He kept talking the way a man keeps pedaling when he's not sure the chain is on the sprocket. He used words he'd never used before. Vehicles, tranches, optimization, and they fit him like a suit borrowed for a funeral. It wasn't the vocabulary that bothered me. It was the trust placed where signatures don't live. I nodded at the folder and asked if he'd leave it so I could read. He did, grateful to offload the weight, even if it was paper. He reached for his coat and hesitated like a boy who has brought a grade home he knows his father will see through. "This could fix it, Pop," he said. Softer. "We just need a door to open." "Doors are funny," I said. "The wrong ones look easy." When the door shut, the kitchen breathed again. I stacked the printouts square. I wrote in my notebook the words Monica had preferred and the ones she had avoided, the numbers she liked and the ones she didn't say out loud. I underlined meet partners twice. Then I checked the recorder's file and saved the time and date in the margin, the way you label a part before you shelve it so you don't end up guessing under a car with a flashlight in your teeth. Dusk pressed its thumbs against the windows. I clicked on the little UV keychain light and dragged it across the bills. The marker sang back in a faint violet line only I could hear. The house held its shape. The plan held its shape. Somewhere beyond my walls, a red bow slept in someone else's garage. I switched off the light and put the money back where I could find it when I needed to see where it went. The garage held winter the way a jar holds air, tight, cold, and metallic. I flipped the switch and the fluorescent tube stuttered to life, buzzing above the bench where wrenches slept in size order. Logan hovered near the door, hands buried in his coat, like a kid who knows he is late and hopes posture can rewind the clock. I pressed the recorder under my collar until it clicked, then set a craft envelope on the workbench. "We're going to talk where engines are honest." "Sit." He sat on the rolling stool. The wheels complained. I slid out the first sheet, the scanned power of attorney with my name bent into someone else's hand. The notary stamp looked official the way costume jewelry can look dear in dim light. Next came the appraisal request, October. Requester listed as Logan Reed. The papers made a dry sound on the wood that felt louder than it should. He looked from one page to the other and waited for them to say something he could live with. I waited too. Then he leaned forward and the color drained from his cheeks like a gauge dropping. "I didn't file a POA." He said he had never seen the document. The appraisal, he added, was something Monica had called normal. Normal to my ear includes consent. Mine was never asked. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands and let the stool drift back an inch, then an inch more, as if distance could cheapen the paper between us. The story came out in pieces. They had refinanced in October. Kara's job had disappeared. Part of the cash went to a deposit on the Lexus and to plugging bills. Monica had promised that her group could consolidate, restructure, breathe air back into a tired budget if they showed they were serious. The car, he admitted, was the proof he thought they needed. I told him proof is easy when you spend money borrowed against a roof you do not own free and clear. He flinched. Behind him, winter light knifed through the small window and found dust like snow that never melts. Panic had been living in his voice for months. I heard it now without disguise. I asked him to call Kara. She arrived with a scarf looped quick around her neck and the polite mask people wear when they think manners can fix math. I laid the POA where she could see it. The fluorescent hummed. The smell of oil turned sweet at the edge. "My sister," she said when I asked who had stamped it. She had asked for help to speed things along. Monica had said older clients hate the hassle and that family could streamline the file. She hadn't thought it meant anything without my say-so. The apology, when it came, was quiet and unadorned. We fix this with the truth, or we don't fix it at all. Then I laid out the rules the way a manual lays out torque specs. No one deletes a message or a photo or any scrap. They gather every text and email from Monica, from the so-called partners, and from the notary sister. No one contacts Monica again. Every step runs through me and through Ruth. They will come back tomorrow, both of them, and they will be clean of lies when they arrive. Kara nodded first, quick, like a drowning person catching a rope. "Understood," she said. Logan lifted his eyes. "Okay." He glanced at the Lexus parked at the curb through the smeared window and then back at the paper. What happens if they push back? Then they push into a wall. A forged power of attorney and an appraisal without authorization are not misunderstandings. They are crimes. If either of them tried to clean their tracks, they would be standing in it alone when the light came on. No one argued. The tube hummed and then flickered, the way fluorescent lights like to punctuate an ultimatum. I wrote the time and place and the key admissions in my notebook, my hand steady from years of labeling parts that must return to the exact machine they came from. Logan signed his name under the notes to mark that they were his words and not my dream of them. Kara did the same for hers. The recorder under my collar watched us be careful. At the door, he hesitated and said he had not meant for it to go this way, that he wanted to be a man about it. Being a man starts with not borrowing other people's names. He nodded again, slower, like the lesson would take several passes to cut its grooves. Kara squeezed his sleeve. They left together as if held there by something sturdier than fear. I stood a moment longer and let the smell of oil and cold steel tell me what it always has. The truth of parts, the patience of torque, the fact that nothing seats right unless you align it before you tighten. I snapped the envelope closed and slid the pages back into place. Outside, the Lexus's chrome caught a smear of light and threw it back at me, showy and useless. I hit the switch. The tube clicked twice and went dark, and the garage exhaled the day it had been holding in its chest. I stayed with the bench a while after the latch caught, smoothing the envelope seam with my thumb the way I used to smooth a gasket before seating a cover. Procedure is a kind of mercy when feeling wants to bolt. I listed the next steps again, catalog, preserve, deliver, revoke, until the words stopped being orders and started being rails. Out in the drive, the Lexus held the memory of a bow, pretty as a bad idea. I thought about how quickly a symbol can turn into a lien and how a house refuses to be anyone's collateral without a fight. Tomorrow would begin with Ruth and with locks for the house that only the right keys could turn. The plan, like a good jack, would lift what panic had dropped. Morning scraped the frost off my thinking. I cleared the table, set out a legal pad and started turning suspicion into paper that looked like invitation, consolidated account snapshots, a neat asset summary that suggested just under $2 million in reachable value, clean fonts, tidy footers. It wasn't a lie in the way a thief lies. It was a mirror angled to catch a thief's eye. I have spent years around torque specs and parts catalogs. I know the comfort of columns that add. Logan arrived with a thermos and a face that had learned something in the garage. We worked the language together until greed would have to lean in to read it. He rehearsed the call to Monica while I adjusted headings. When he was ready, he stepped into the hall and dialed on speaker. "Monica, it's Logan." "Dad," he's reconsidered. "He'd like to move forward, but he wants to meet your partners, face to face." I watched his shoulders square to a tone I'd taught him when he was 10 and asking a parts counter for exactly what he needed. Monica made the sound people make when they see a door they've been pushing open on its own. "Wonderful," she said, and then dressed in care. "They're very private. But I can host. Friday, 3 o'clock, my place, She emphasized timing like weather. The window is narrow. Then the ask arrived to hold our slot. A small cash retainer, 200, dropped by tonight. No need for a receipt until we execute, she cooed. Keeps it clean. After the call, Logan stared at the phone like it might confess. I pulled a small envelope from the drawer, slid in 1020s, already bearing a thin UV line tucked along the portrait, and sealed the flap. This doesn't buy a slot, I said. It buys a trail. He nodded. Fear teaches fast. Before he left, I drove to Ruth's office. Her holiday skeleton crew had the lights low, the way winter asks you to speak quietly. We sat with a printed beneficiary deed, TOD, transfer on death, naming a community foundation as the house's remainder owner. It left me in full command for as long as my breath comes, and then welded the title to a promise no forged stamp could pry back. Ruth explained recording cues and holiday delays, then slid across a revocation packet for the fraudulent POA with sticky flags where pins would land when the time came. Call me before anyone hands you uppin', she said again. I signed where the law asked me to sign and felt something in the frame of the house settle. On her way out, she paused. I'll place alerts with the banks and bureaus. And Sam, don't chase. Let them run into what they've built. Procedure, like prayer, works best when you keep at it. The day crisped. I checked the button recorder's memory, set its date stamp, and clipped it under my collar until it sat like a decision. I tested the UV keychain against one of the 20s through the paper envelope. The line sang violet, faint as breath on glass. When Logan came back for the drop, I handed him the envelope and a sentence. Straight to her porch. Photo of the mat after you set it down. Then home. He texted the photo 20 minutes later, the envelope centered on Monica's stone step, a neat rectangle of intent. A minute after that, her text. Got it. Thank you. We did not write back. Evening drew its dark line across the living room. I was oiling a hinge that had learned to complain when Ruth's text buzzed the table into life. She had been on the phone with a contact who monitors suspicious deposits for a local bank. Holiday staffing makes strange friends. Attached were 2 stills from a security package. In the first, a woman in a black coat, the profile echoing Monica's, leaned into an ATM kiosk, hairpinned with the same lacquered assertiveness I had seen at my sink. In the second, a screen capture from the validation console glowed with a fan of 20s under the note scanner's light, a faint bright line crossing each portrait exactly where my marker had walked. Timestamp, 40 minutes after Logan's photo. Deposit account, Sunfield Capital. I felt no triumph. Relief, yes, the kind you feel when a leak you suspected beads on the paper towel where you placed it, but not triumph. I forwarded the stills to my own inbox, printed a hard copy for the file, and wrote the date and time in my square hand. Judy used to joke that my handwriting made even bad news look organized. I slid the images into the envelope with the fake asset summary and the appraisal log and the forged POA scan. The file had begun to feel like weight you carry to the counter when you are ready to stop guessing and start ordering parts. I called Logan and told him what Ruth had sent. He exhaled as if someone had loosened a strap. So, they're real. Real enough to prosecute, I said, and real enough to walk us into Friday careful. He was quiet a second. Thanks, Pop. There are words a father hears that slip past anger and set to work. I shut off the kitchen light and stood where the 2 rooms meet, the way a man will stand in a doorway and measure a space before moving a heavy thing through it. The recorder lay charging on the counter, a tiny red eye steady as a heartbeat. On Friday, we would go to Monica's house with our patience and our paper and the weight of a plan that had been learning our names. I pictured the red bow from Christmas asleep in someone else's garage and thought about how decorations and disguises do the same job. Both ask you to see what they want you to see. The house breathed warm air up through the vents. I put the printouts away and set my pen on top of the file like a level. When you are building a straight line toward daylight, it helps to know where every inch will go. Monica's house had that showroom hush money buys. Glass that forgot fingerprints, rugs that drank footsteps, orchids trained to bloom on cue, a candle the color of expensive hotels worked citrus into the air. She met us at the door with a practiced warmth and led us past a console crowded with glossy books whose spines all had the word living in them. I felt the recorder under my collar and thought of a stethoscope, small, cold, intent on hearing what performance tries to hide. Her living room had been staged into a conference. Low table cleared, 2 chairs angled toward a folder, pins laid like cutlery. Through a doorway, I clocked a briefcase and a stamp kit on a side cart. Office in a box, the kind you wheel in when you need a signature to feel inevitable. Monica smoothed her blouse and apologized for her team. "They're dealing with a client emergency," she said, sympathy cued just right. "I'll represent the structure today, then loop them for the formalities." Kara and Logan sat on the sofa's edge like guests who weren't sure how much of the cushions they were allowed to borrow. I took the chair that let me see both the door and the papers. Monica began to talk in the voice designed for you to borrow its confidence. The program, she said, would begin with a sale to a discreet partner paired with a leaseback calibrated to seniors on fixed income. It would unlock sleeping equity, move us into instruments with upside but minimal downside. And here, her smile sharpened, optimize our exposure through international vehicles that benefit from favorable treaties. She let the last phrase linger as if it were a view. I asked how much the first step wanted. She turned a page, and there it was. An initial commitment in the neighborhood of $700, sufficient to open accounts, seed the structure, and signal seriousness. She tapped a deadline printed in a font that made dates look benign. "Windows close," she said. I placed our asset summary where she could see it. The tidy columns worked on her the way lemon juice works on dark tea. The color changed. Her pupils narrowed. She recalculated in public without moving her lips. Then came the quieter voice, the one conspirators save for over-dessert. "Given your reach," she said, "we can accelerate the timetable. There are offshore components that would materially improve your tax position. Completely legal if you know where to stand." The recorder sat against my sternum like a second heartbeat. My pen hovered, then stayed still. I asked whether her partners would join us by video. "They prefer not to leave footprints," she said. "Privacy is a value in our space." She checked her watch in a way that suggested grown-ups respect clocks. Kara did what we'd rehearsed, her tone bright with the hope of pleasing a teacher. "Does the Lexus count as a good faith fee?" Monica didn't miss. "Absolutely," she said, too quick. "Demonstrated capacity matters." Logan looked at the coffee table as if it might swallow him. Monica slid a signature sheet forward, non-binding expression of intent, a phrase designed to lower a guard, and nudged a pen toward my reach. A notary, she mentioned casually, was available if we preferred to memorialize anything today. The briefcase on the side cart confirmed it. Stamp, ledger, pads. The kit hummed like a motor idling, ready to be revved at the first nod. I let her fill the room with explanations and exceptions, with phrases that promised precision without bearing any. She narrated the sale-leaseback like it were a lifestyle plan instead of a lien, described the lease as friendly, the rent as predictable, the timeline as gentle. She said "we" often enough to pretend the interests were aligned. When she mentioned wiring protocols and the need to break transfers into tasteful tranches, she glanced up to see if we could keep a secret. I gave her the same face I once gave distributors who sold me parts out of a trunk. Neutral, present, counting without counting aloud. Her phone vibrated face up on the table. The lock screen showed a name I recognized from 3 nights of research and 1 clean headshot. Daniel. The screen lit the bone of her wrist. She flipped the phone over in 1 practice motion and kept talking. It buzzed again. She lowered her voice as if to outrun it. I asked for written credentials for the partner entity that would take title, then for a copy of their errors and omissions coverage, then for a pitch deck that used real numbers and not adjectives. She sidestepped with the grace of a person who has never found no to be a necessary word. "We curate," she said. "We are boutique. Our clients value discretion." Kara glanced at me. I could feel her breath get smaller. Fear makes lungs forget how deep they were built to go. Logan's knee bounced once and stopped. I thought of my house's joists, old fur holding a winter heavier than it looks, and felt a spine from the sill plate up. Monica pivoted to process. She described a courier for the deposit, a same-day opening for a feeder account at a private bank, a trust wrapper to future-proof the assets, and a notary who could save us a trip downtown. She produced a prefab checklist with boxes that wanted my initials. At the bottom, next to a signature line, sat a printed word that shouldn't have been there: seller. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I'll need names. Of the entity, of the counsel, of the trustee, of the bank officer who shakes our hand." She smiled like a teacher grading a clever student. "That's what Friday's closing is for." The phone buzzed a 3rd time. She let it ring out. "People think the world will wait for them," she said, over a page that would have made waiting illegal. I let the silence refill its lungs. She took the pen again and circled a date. "Shall we reserve your slot?" Kara leaned into her line as if she had practiced it in a mirror. "If the Lexus already shows our capacity, is there any flexibility on the initial 700? Monica's mouth softened. "We appreciate gestures," she said, "but the consortium observes minimums." The recorder kept listening. I pictured Ruth's file, the purple sheen across 20s under a scanner's light, the ATM stills with a code I could swear I had seen from my sink. I pictured the house quiet in the afternoon, the vent unrolling heat, the line on the beneficiary deed where my pen had fixed the frame. I thought of Judy and the way she would tilt her head when a salesman used the word forever. I closed my notebook. "We'll take this under advisement," I said. "Bring your partners next time." Monica's smile thinned at the edges. She pushed the pen back toward me with 2 fingers. "I'd hate to see you miss a window." At the door, she kissed the air near Kara's cheek, squeezed Logan's sleeve, and rested a hand on my forearm in that careful way of people who want to write your response for you with their touch. Her phone buzzed again on the console as we stepped onto the stoop. I did not need to see the name twice. Outside, the afternoon had cooled into a harder light. The recorder's file timer ticked up inside my pocket. Numbers make their own kind of weather. We walked to the truck without speaking. In the glass, I could see our faces. My mouth a straight line, Logan's taking the shape of regret, Kara's trying to be brave around its edges. By the time the engine caught, I had already titled the entry in my notebook for what this meeting was. Evidence gathered, pressure applied, mask slipping. Inside that perfect house, a notary kit waited beside a phone with a son's name on it. Out here, winter finally remembered its teeth. We didn't speak until the subdivision dipped behind us and the windshield wore only sky. I pulled to the curb 2 blocks from my place and set the phone on the console. "Call him," I said. Logan understood which him. He dialed, hit speaker, and said our name first so a stranger would not have to pull it from our mouths. "Mr. Lai, this is Sam Reed. I'm calling from my phone with my son beside me." A breath, the steadying kind, crossed the line. "Thank you for calling," he said. "Is my mother with you?" "No, we just left a meeting at her house. I believe she's running a scheme that targets seniors. I have documents and recordings." Silence found its shape, then a choice. "I'll fly to Denver," he said. Sunday morning. By the time the porch light clicked on for evening, Ruth had us at her table. The lamp carved a circle on the wood. Inside it, we laid a story that could stand up without someone leaning on it. She drafted a complaint to hold our place in the stream of consequence. Elder fraud, forgery, conspiracy, money laundering. She stapled a copy of the forged POA, the appraisal request, the fake asset summary I had used as bait, and a log of calls and texts with dates that behaved. "Fraud alerts go out tonight," she said, already typing. "Banks, credit bureaus, title monitors. And tomorrow we revoke the POA at recording. Bring shoes for winter lines mourning at the county meant damp coats and polite, tired faces. We filed the revocation, time-stamped and witnessed by people who do this work in quiet because it matters whether lines meet. Ruth posted an internal watch, so any attempt to touch my deed would call her phone. We left copies at the bank where a manager whose tie had seen better days promised to flag my profile. Procedure isn't glamorous, but it is ballast in chop. That afternoon, Daniel walked into Ruth's office carrying a laptop and an apology he didn't let bloom into self-punishment. He looked like his headshots until life touched them at the edges. "I'm here for the clients, even when they're my family," he said, not as a performance but as an oath he'd already paid interest on. He slid emails across the table, threads between Monica and a Sunfield contact, full of euphemism dressed for brunch, wiring instructions lined up like train cars, references to tranches and wrappers, and a notary who travels. He did not redact. "If the DA asks, I'll testify," he said. "I won't shield her." I showed him Ruth's stills, the ATM kiosk, the fan of 20s glowing under a scanner's light, the faint violet line writing every portrait where my marker had walked. He leaned closer, jaw set. "That's enough to locate the account," he said, and he began a note to a bank officer he trusted to keep counsel and clock. Then he gave us what we didn't know to ask for. Monica's ex, he said, had been an on-call contractor for a title and escrow outfit across the line in Cheyenne. He had access to search credentials and had liked to impress dates with the way he could see behind curtains. The timestamp on my October appraisal request lined up with a weekend where that ex had logged in when no one else did. "I can get you the access report," Daniel said. "If he touched Sam's parcel, the metadata will say so." The circle we had drawn around the con tightened another notch. It never once broke. We built the next 48 hours like scaffolding. Logan would text Monica that I'd slept on it and wanted to proceed if we could formalize the structure on Monday. In the same breath, he would ask her to bring her Team Monica in character, would insist they were private, and would offer to host again. I would ask for the notary to save a trip downtown. Ruth would be waiting 3 blocks away with a detective who knew how to listen for crimes dressed as courtesies. Daniel would brief the DA that night, sharing our package and his, and keep himself out of the room on Monday so the conflict of blood didn't tangle the clean line of duty. At home, I packed a quiet bag, recorder charged and time-stamped, copies of everything in duplicate, a pen that didn't skip, a legal pad with the questions that turned pitches into sworn statements. I pre-wrote a timeline down the margin so I could drop facts into slots without losing the hour. The house hummed like a machine whose parts all remember each other. Snow freckled the walk where last week a bow had blazed. I put the beneficiary deed in the fire safe and traced its label with my thumb. I do not fetishize paper, but I respect what it can do. Sunday brought church bells from a block where I don't attend but appreciate the schedule, and a text from Daniel. DA looped in. Monday okayed. Call if anything shifts. We didn't spend the day chasing. We let the con run toward its own edge. I stocked the truck with blankets and a thermos because I am the kind of man who brings a jack to a flat and a second coat to a storm. Logan and Kara came by with a sandwich and gratitude that had stopped trying to buy absolution. We rehearsed what not to say. No adjectives, no volunteering, no rescuing a liar with your nerves. Breathe through your nose, I told Logan. People here shallow. Before dusk, Ruth called with the last square of the quilt. The revocation had indexed, the fraud alerts had posted, a watch sat on my parcel like a night guard. Remember, she said, don't sign. If a pen touches paper, it's a detective's pen. I set my bag by the door and the recorder on the counter where it blinked a red, patient heartbeat. The house thinned into quiet that wasn't empty. I walked it once, hand on jams, feeling how the frame threw itself into its work when wind lifted from the foothills. Judy would have approved of the list on the fridge and the way the wrenches were laid out by size on the bench. When I killed the light, the rooms held steady. Tomorrow we would go back to a living room that pretended to be an office, to a woman who pretended to be a partner, and we would let truth take the chair no one had saved for it these last months. Some problems asked for fury. This one asked for paper, patience, and a knock at a door at the right time. Monday wore a banker's gray. We parked a half block from Monica's address and let the heater tick. I checked the recorder with a thumb to the red eye and felt its faint warmth through my shirt. Logan stared at his hands the way a man looks at tools he's misused. Kara kept her breath measured, in through the nose like we'd practiced. When the minute hand found our time, we walked. She opened the door with brisk hospitality, the kind that expects to be obeyed. Inside, the living room had been reset to closing, documents fanned like a deck, a pen laid across the top sheet, the notary kit closer to the center now, ready to be important. The air had that starch hotels buy by the gallon. "So glad you came back," she said, guiding us to our marks. "We can keep this clean and quick." I didn't sit until my angle took the doorway into its frame. She began with the preface lawyers borrow when they want to sound less like themselves. As discussed. The sell leaseback appeared again, this time wearing a purchase price and lease schedule that pretended to be reasonable if you squinted. She glossed the rent, the escalator, the cure periods, then the pages with wiring instructions, then a trust wrapper with blanks for a trustee I had not met. A signature line waited under my printed name. Beside it, a second line labeled seller, like it had always belonged to me. I placed the fake asset summary on the table and slid it 2 inches closer to her. "Before we move," I said, "let's be thorough. Please list the Lexus RX as consideration provided to date." She blinked once, then recovered with a smooth pen stroke to the margin, writing a note that looked official and meant nothing. The recorder watched her hand write something that would read poorly later. Her phone face down on the console vibrated. She let it. "Shall we begin?" The notary kit crept forward. The pen's clip flashed under the can lights. "Before any signature," I said, "I'll need the entity's legal name, counsel of record, and the bank officer who will receive funds." She circled back to discretion, to boutique service, to curated experiences. I let the words roll until they made their own noise. Then I set my palm on the top page as if to steady it. "You'll understand if we document names today." Her mouth narrowed. She angled the pen toward my fingers, a nudge with a smile attached. "Mister, read, you risk missing your window." The knock was gentle, official, and not interested in politeness. 2 officers stepped in at my shoulder, winter on their uniforms, warrant already spoken in their bones. "Police," the lead said, voice steady, badge shown. "We're here with a search order for records related to suspected elder fraud and money laundering." Monica's first reaction wasn't shock, it was calculation, eyes flicking to exits that weren't doors. Kara's hand found the hem of her coat and held on. Logan sat very still, as if staying put might be the first right thing he had done in months. The officers moved with the economy of people who have practiced this room in their heads, one to the table to freeze the papers, one to the side cart to secure the notary kit, a third from the hallway to collect electronics from the console. The briefcase clicked shut in a gloved hand. Monica stood, chin high, and arranged her face into a posture of affront. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "These are private family arrangements." The lead officer read the warrant in calm paragraphs. "We'll be taking these documents and devices. You're not under arrest at this moment. Do not touch your phone." She touched the table instead, fingertips flexing like the start of a sprint. The second officer opened an evidence bag and slid in the signature sheets with the care of a librarian closing a first edition. Through the front window, I saw Daniel on the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, a man choosing how to be a son and a lawyer in the same minute. He didn't come in. The shape of his help lived outside that threshold. When the officers requested identification, Monica produced it with a controlled exhale. Her phone lit on the console with his name one last time. She didn't reach. We gave statements in the dining room under a chandelier that had opinions. I kept mine lean, dates, names, how we had come to be in a room that wanted a signature I would not give. Logan spoke in short, true pieces. Kara handed over her phone and the text thread with her sister the notary, thumbs trembling only once. "It was just to make it faster," she said. The detective nodded without comfort and asked for the sister's commission number. We provided the ATM stills Ruth had printed. A black coat at a kiosk, a fan of marked 20s under a scanner's light, the deposit tag reading Sunfield Capital. Procedure bent to collect the pieces and did not break. When the officers finished with us, they turned back to Monica. "Ma'am, please place your hands where I can see them." Cuffs glinted only when they had to. The room, freed of performance, exhaled an old air. On the table, the pen lay on its side like a tool that had lost its job. Outside, the day had found blue in the gray. Daniel met us at the walk. "I'm sorry," he said, a sentence that belonged to more moments than one. "I've already briefed the DA I'll cooperate." His eyes were red at the edges, not from cold. Logan nodded once, not in forgiveness but in recognition of a weight set down where it must be set. Months made their slow work. Monica pled to elder fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and laundering through Sunfield Capital. She stood in a courtroom that smelled of varnish and winter cloth and let a clerk say her name the way the state says it. I did not attend every hearing. I went to the one where the plea was entered and the one where sentence became math. Daniel spoke there, careful and plain, about harm measured in more than money. He did not look to us for absolution, and we did not try to give it. The law took its straight line. On paper, the road back home was short. The fraudulent POA was revoked and indexed. Flags sat on my accounts like quiet dogs. The beneficiary deed had recorded welding the frame of the house to a future I had chosen on a weekday afternoon with Ruth's lamp on. The title slept like a door latched against weather. Logan and Kara sold the Lexus RX for less than Pride had paid, walked cash to the mortgage, and brought me a receipt that looked like a bruise healing. They started therapy that didn't fix them in a week, but taught them which words to stop using on themselves. He found a second shift. She found part-time that would grow. They brought dinner once a week and didn't overtalk the past. Gratitude, like trust, returns as quiet work. One evening, when the light ran thin across the counter, I set the $5 pig beside our wedding photo the way you'd set a paperweight beside a map. The pig's grin, chintzy and permanent, no longer felt like a jeer. It felt like a mile marker. Sometimes the smallest humiliation keeps you awake long enough to notice the real theft moving in the dark. Judy watched me from lace and sepia, amused that plastic could do what sermons can't. I logged the last entry in the notebook I'd started the week of the bow. Search executed, arrest made, plea entered, sentence served to the calendar's satisfaction. Then I closed the cover and returned the book to the drawer where we used to keep stamps. The house breathed and settled, the way houses do when they believe you again. In the garage, wrenches rested by size, the bench was clean, and the fluorescent tube lit on the first try. Order isn't drama. It's the absence of grip in a place where you need both hands for something else. On the first Sunday that felt like spring, the church basement smelled of coffee and lemon bars, and the folding chairs made a circle that could hold a story without tipping. I am not much for microphones, so I kept it simple. I told the parents' group what we had learned with paper and patience, that love isn't a brokerage fee, that family is not collateral, that the line between help and harm is a signature drawn in the wrong hand. Heads nodded in the quiet way. People nod when the words have already happened to them. A man in a ball cap wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I said one more thing because it needed air. Forgiveness is not deleting evidence. A few people laughed the small laugh you make when truth shows it's working. At home, sunlight sloped across the counter where I keep the pig. $5 inside, same as the night it landed here, but the sound is different now. Back then it whispered insult. Now it clicks like a metronome, reminding me to keep time. I set it beside Judy's photo and cleaned the frame the way I clean a tool I still trust. Her lace grin has not aged since the day we promised to try. I like to think she approves of the list on the fridge and the file in the safe and the way the house stands square when the wind looks for something to lean on. Logan and Kara come by on Sundays without the need to over-explain. They bring groceries and silence that isn't avoidance. He fixes the screen door, she trims the rosemary and wraps the stems for the neighbors. They started a budget that uses everyday verbs and quit saying rescue like a coupon. Therapy has not made them saints, but it taught them to tell the truth while their hands are still open. When the mail brings something with too many pages, they set it on the table and wait for me to sit. We do not pretend paper is a friend. We treat it like a bridge you walk only after you stamp on the planks. Most weeks he tries to press cash into my palm for a brake job or a hinge, or the kind of advice that looks like nothing until you price the alternative. I keep a clear jar on the bench for moments like that. Money goes in where I can see it. He sees it too. Sometimes I let it stay, sometimes I lift the lid and pour it back. Not today, I say. Today, the wage is dinner. The first time he laughed like he did when he was 10 and I let him drive the mower in a crooked line. You sure, Pop? I'm sure. We eat in the kitchen where the chairs remember us and nobody brings a bow. A neighbor asked last week whether I ever think about moving to something smaller. I told him the truth, which is also a map. This house is sized to my mistakes and my repairs, I said. It fits. The legal instruments Ruth helped me set will outlive me without chewing me while I am here. The title sleeps under a promise I chose when my hands were steady. I learned this. You lock a door before a storm, not because you expect the wind to be kind, but because you respect the frame. Sometimes I speak at the library when they host workshops on protecting older folks from clever friends. I bring copies of a timeline with the dates sanded down to what the law prefers. I show a photo of a 20 glowing under a scanner's light and a list of questions that turn charm into evidence. I keep the tone plain. The point is not to scare anyone, it is to hand them a habit. Notice, document, breathe, verify. A woman in the back once asked what to do when the person who scares you is your own child. I did not answer fast. You start with a boundary and a chair, I said. You sit them down and you tell the truth so the room can hear it. Then you keep the receipts. In the evenings, I still walk the rooms with my palm on the jams. The house hums. The garage smells like oil and a good day. Wrenches rest in order. The tube light snaps on without complaint. Restored things are not what they were. They are honest about their scars. That is enough. Now and then the pig catches sunlight and looks like something finer than its price. It is not. It is plastic, but it taught a lesson only a cheap thing could teach at the time I needed it. A symbol can be a compass if you let it point. I keep it where I can see it to remember that dignity is a bill you pay on time, especially when no one is passing the hat. We took a family photo last Sunday on the porch steps because Kara said it was time to have a new one that wasn't trying to forget the old. Emma held the dog that is technically mine but loves everyone, and Jake raised his chin like boys do when they are learning the geography of their faces. Logan stood next to me without reaching for a pocket. "One more," Kara said, and the second shot caught us unposed, mid-breath, real. Later, I put it in the hallway across from our wedding picture. Judy and I facing forward, the rest of us a little off-center, still steady. When the evening draws down and the foothills turn the last light into shape, I sit on the back step with a mug and remember the sound a garage door makes when a bad day finally ends. There was a time in December when I mistook spectacle for power and quiet for loss. The red bow is gone. What remains is the table, the jar, the file, the habit of checking the latch, and the easy yes to a Sunday dinner that does not require proof of anything. I don't need more. I need exactly this. By the time the bow comes down and the noise of celebration thins, what remains is the work of keeping a life square. Not the drama, not the bargains whispered over urgency, but the habits that hold when wind rattles the frame. Notice, document, verify, breathe before you sign. Treat paper like a bridge you test with your heel. Love, for all its warmth, is not a brokerage fee, and family is not collateral. Boundaries are not walls against affection. They are door frames that let trust walk through without ducking its head. In the quiet after spectacle, dignity becomes an ordinary practice. You set the jar where everyone can see it. You keep receipts. You say no with a calm voice and yes with clear terms. Forgiveness does not delete evidence. It simply refuses to let bitterness be the bookkeeper. Accountability stays. Mercy shows up anyway. That is how houses stand, how names survive their hardest season, how ordinary tables become the safest place in the world. If any part of this story brushed a nerve or steadied your hand, I'm grateful you spent the time. Tell me what stayed with you, what you would have done differently, what warnings or grace you've earned the hard way. Leave a comment so others can learn from it. Follow along if you want more work like this, plain, careful, and hopeful. And if you think it might help someone you love, share it. The quiet things, documents, boundaries, a steady yes to dinner, are small, but they change the weather.